I want to welcome everyone, and we're celebrating International Women's Day, although I think every day should be International Women's Day. It shouldn't be a special day. But I think it's really important to acknowledge in our field of design and typography the accomplishments of, I would say, remarkable women. And so the HMCT decided to have our virtual typographer in residency this year by inviting 5 highly talented and creative Hispanic women to present and to allow them to have take some time from their very busy professional academic careers to do a little bit more research into the subject matter that they might find interesting, intriguing. So this is our way of celebrating International Women's Day by presenting this to you. So the format today, what we're going to do is each of our residents will present, starting with Marina, then Jimena, then Laura, and then Sandra and Daphne. At the end, we will then bring everyone back together for Q&A and a little panel discussion. So we're not going to have Q&A or discussion till the end. So I'm very excited about today. So hopefully we can get through all of this quickly, which means I have to be quiet. So I'm going to ask everyone now to welcome our first presenter, Marina Garone Gravier, to talk about her research project and her subject matter. So welcome, Marina, and why don't you tell us about your project?
Muchísimas gracias, Gloria, y bienvenidos todos a este día. Estamos un poco nerviosos y nerviosas, pero muy contentos. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer a la residencia por haberme dado la oportunidad de centrarme en la figura de Carolina Amor de Fournier. Voy a dar lectura a un texto. Carolina Amor de Fournier, Ciudad de México, 1908-1993, fue una editora, escritora y traductora mexicana, específicamente de obras científicas y médicas, pero además tiene otra faceta, que tuvo un breve pero pionero papel en la enseñanza de la historia del libro y la tipografía en México, así como en el reconocimiento a las mujeres en el mundo de la cultura impresa. Hice esta investigación porque considero que en ella, en Carolina, se encarnan algunos de los elementos clave que permiten pensar en el rol que las mujeres han tenido en la historia del libro y la edición en América Latina y en México. Creo además que es una figura en la que muchas jóvenes estudiantes y académicas se pueden inspirar. Por eso vale la pena conocer un poco más su vida, y para esta investigación he recurrido a la documentación publicada que se ha conservado sobre ella, también a algunas entrevistas y consultas, algunas hechas por mí y otras que se realizaron por otras personas, y además algunos artículos periodísticos. Este trabajo tiene también una faceta de breve ensayo biográfico, pero también procura compendiar la producción bibliográfica de Carolina. En un artículo de 2005, Elena Urrutia destacaba su descubrimiento de Carolina Amor y la sorpresa ante la invisibilidad que algunos registros y estudios previos de la vida mexicana la habían sometido, a causa de la sombra involuntaria que provocaron sobre ella y su trayectoria profesional 2 de sus hermanas, Guadalupe Amor, mejor conocida como Pita, e Inés Amor. La primera, la menor de la familia, había nacido en México en 1920 y alcanzado reconocimiento por su labor poética, su comportamiento libre para los cánones de la época y haber sido musa inspiradora de Roberto Montenegro y Diego Rivera, quienes le dedicaron algunos retratos. Inés, la otra hermana, heredó la Galería de Arte Mexicano que inició Carolina y logró conformarla como uno de los espacios más destacados para la difusión de la pintura local, en un momento decisivo en la discusión del papel político del arte y la ampliación del canon visual en México. Al parecer, los inicios de la Galería de Arte se ubican físicamente en el domicilio de Carolina, antes de pasar a la zona rosa, donde tuvo sus locales más recordados. Carolina Estaba empezando sus labores periodísticas cuando le tocó realizar un reportaje al afamado director de orquesta Carlos Chávez, reportaje que salió en la Revista de Revistas en 1929. Ese hecho casual le permitió colaborar activamente con él, primero en el Conservatorio Nacional de Música y más tarde en el Departamento de Bellas Artes, en la producción de programas y cobertura de prensa. Ese departamento se convertiría en 1946 en el Instituto Nacional de Bellas Artes y fue un momento de riquísima efervescencia cultural. Con Chávez participaron notables figuras como Rufino Tamayo en la jefatura de artes plásticas, Celestino Gorostiza en la dirección de teatro y Rodolfo Usigli en los programas radiales de teatro clásico. Allí, Carolina conoció a Gabriel Fernández Ledesma y a Francisco Díaz de León, la dupla más relevante del diseño y la edición de la posrevolución mexicana, y es posible que ese vínculo jugara un papel importante para que más tarde Carolina ingresara a la Escuela de Artes del Libro. Carolina se ocupaba de la organización y promoción de actividades artísticas del Departamento de Bellas Artes, como por ejemplo las exposiciones de pintura. La estancia en el departamento le permitió conocer y tratar a la mayoría de los artistas visuales de ese momento, lo que le permitió identificar que había una necesidad de crear un espacio paralelo al gubernamental para que dichos artistas pudieran mostrar y vender sus obras. Cuando Carolina renunció al Departamento de Bellas Artes en 1934, fue el momento en que decidió dar inicio a la promoción de artistas y fue así que en marzo de 1935 abrió la Galería de Arte Mexicano, proyecto que en diciembre de ese mismo año dejó en manos de su hermana Inés. Avendaño y Urrutia, un colaborador y una estudiosa de Carolina, coinciden en que tras casarse y hacer una larga estancia en Europa, Carolina se inició en las artes del libro en París, aunque no señalan ningún dato que nos permita localizar ese periodo formativo. Según las fuentes consultadas, es al regreso a México en 1939 cuando Amor se encarga de la dirección de la revista La Prensa Médica Mexicana, que había fundado su marido médico y que pocos años más tarde decidió ingresar a la Escuela de Artes del Libro de la Secretaría de Educación Pública, fundada la escuela por Francisco Díaz de León. Entró en 1943 para cursar la carrera de maestra de ediciones. Al parecer, un año más tarde, se incorporó a la planta docente en calidad primero de maestra y más tarde como directora. Cuando Carolina ingresó, la escuela se reorganizó en torno a 4 carreras: director de ediciones, grabador, encuadernador y tipógrafo. Solo 3 años más tarde, en 1946, la escuela cerró, pero tras intensas gestiones de su director se reabrió con el nombre de Escuela Nacional de Artes del Libro, pero ahora solo con 3 carreras: encuadernación, ediciones y grabado. En 1958, la escuela se convirtió en Escuela Nacional de Artes Gráficas. Si bien el alumnado de la escuela fue mayoritariamente masculino, en la revista que publicó la escuela aparecen referencias de varias mujeres que pasaron por ahí. De Carolina encontramos la credencial de alumna en la que señala tener 32 años y ser periodista de profesión. La fecha del documento es febrero de 1943, es decir, en el mismo año en que se había reorganizado el plan de estudios de la institución. En la revista se pueden leer las siguientes reseñas sobre Amor. Carolina Amor de Fournier, una dama cabal, que consagró al aprendizaje de materias editoriales en nuestra escuela no solo un fervor sin paralelo, sino que luego le prestó servicios impartiendo magníficas lecciones de historia del libro, inglés y francés. Directora de la Prensa Médica Mexicana, su trato cotidiano con los libros y su devoción por la tipografía la impulsaron a fundar Editorial Fournier y a ocupar un cargo prominente en el Instituto Mexicano del Libro. No puede imaginarse a la señora Amor de Fournier apartada del marco por ella elegido a través de una selección personalísima: la página impresa, las bellas ediciones, la incitación continua del arte, la finura en todo y por todo. En varios números de la revista, en la sección Los libros de la antigüedad, firmada por Pablo G. Macías, uno de los profesores de historia, en el inicio se lee la siguiente advertencia: El material de estos artículos pertenece en su mayor parte al acervo acumulado por los maestros Francisco Orozco Muñoz, Carolina Amor de Fournier y Francisco Díaz de León para las clases de historia del libro, el cual sirve de base a la enseñanza que sobre esta interesante materia se imparte en la Escuela Nacional de las Artes del Libro. Quizá, a causa de sus clases de historia, es que Carolina se interesó por las mujeres impresoras mexicanas. La primera evidencia de ello fue la conferencia que impartió en la sala Ponce del Palacio de Bellas Artes en marzo de 1963 y bajo el título Notas sobre la mujer en la tipografía mexicana, que tiene un retrato de Carolina dibujado y firmado por D. Trinidad. Amor recurrió a las principales bibliografías existentes hasta ese momento para el estudio del libro colonial. Leyó a García y Casbalceta, a José Toribio Medina, Andrade, León, Balton y también González de Cosillo. Añadió a esos estudios clásicos la monografía de Millares Carlos sobre el impresor Juan Pablos y la de Stolz sobre Ocharte. Casi una década más tarde, Carolina publicó el opúsculo La mujer en la tipografía mexicana, edición en su homenaje de sus colaboradores y proveedores con ocasión de los 25 años de constante y trascendente labor editorial al frente de la prensa médica mexicana. En esa monografía, Carolina hace un recuento de las viudas y algunas otras mujeres que aparecen en los pies de imprenta de los impresos coloniales, sistemáticamente olvidadas por la historia. El texto está ilustrado con varias portadas de esos libros antiguos. Carolina se casó en 1935 con el doctor Raúl Fournier, destacado gastroenterólogo y director de la Escuela de Medicinas de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Fue él quien invitó a Carolina a hacerse cargo de la dirección de la revista La Prensa Médica y justamente dicha publicación daría pie a crear la empresa editorial La Prensa Médica Mexicana, que Carolina fundaría más tarde. En 1987, cuando Perla Schwartz entrevistó a Carolina, se señala que el catálogo de la casa contaba con más de 300 títulos divididos a su vez en 45 especialidades. Conforme pasó el tiempo, la línea editorial se fue ampliando e incluyó aspectos de administración y atención hospitalaria, salud pública, medicina del deporte e inclusive obras sobre veterinaria, entre otras muchas materias, orientadas a estudiantes, enfermeras y muchos profesionistas de escasos recursos. Si bien Carolina será recordada principalmente por su labor en torno a la edición científica mexicana, ella no solo hizo libros técnicos, también hizo otras publicaciones, la combinación de sus aficiones a las artes del libro. En este contexto es preciso señalar que el libro más antiguo en el que participó fue Nueva Historia de Europa, de Gustavo Hervé, publicado en México en 1944, que ella tradujo junto a Ignacio Amor. El sello editorial de esta obra, CAF, me hace pensar que se trata de la empresa Carolina Amor de Fournier. Al parecer, Amor pronto reconoció que requería un taller tipográfico mejor y más equipado, motivo que la impulsó a establecer uno propio que contara con todo lo necesario y para ello pidió asesoría al tipógrafo catalán Juan Climent y con el nuevo equipo fundó Editorial Fournier, que luego se convertiría en Ediciones Copilco, haciendo alusión a la zona del sur de la Ciudad de México, donde en 1953 se había establecido la editorial La Prensa Médica Mexicana, justo enfrente de la Facultad de Medicina de la Universidad Nacional. De aquellos libros de amor es posible mencionar varios de tema artístico, botánico y zoológico, algunos más de poesía y otros que podríamos considerar de temas generales o de líneas más indefinidas. Del segundo grupo de temas encontramos el libro de Pellman, Orquídeas de México, cuya primera edición salió en 58. Del mismo autor, también publicaría uno de los más bellos libros al cuidado de amor, Colibríes y Orquídeas de México, del que realizó además el cuidado editorial, el prólogo y la obra salió en 1963. En 1980 publicó Mariposas diurnas del Valle de México y 4 años más tarde publicó Mariposas de México. En la línea literaria publicó 3 libros de su hermana Pita: Fuga de Negras, como Reina de Barajas, ilustrada por Antonio Peláez, y Décimas Adiós, cuya primera edición había salido en Tezontle en 1953. Sin embargo, en Fournier también publicó varios títulos de línea médica, como Dinámica de la conducta humana, La psicología del hombre en relación con la vida instintiva y Mexico's Ancient and Native Remedies. Al parecer, el último libro publicado en 1987 en editorial Fournier fue A la memoria de Raúl Fournier Villada, su esposo. Consciente de su importante papel en el campo de las artes del libro, Carolina fue activa en asuntos gremiales. Fue nombrada presidenta del Instituto Mexicano del Libro en 1954 y reelecta para un segundo periodo en 1957. Participó en la organización de 2 ferias nacionales del libro, en varias exposiciones de libros mexicanos en el extranjero y en la publicación de 2 ediciones del catálogo de libros impresos en México. Además, representó a México en el primer Festival del Libro de América en Venezuela en 1956. En 1980, ya con una trayectoria consolidada, fue la primera mujer en recibir el premio Juan Pablos al mérito editorial que otorga la Cámara Nacional de la Industria Editorial Mexicana. La señora Fournier sufrió una embolia en 1983 y falleció 10 años más tarde, el 11 de septiembre de 1993. Hasta aquí lo que puedo presentar para ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Marina. I mean, we have so much to we can talk about it, but we're gonna talk about it afterwards. But thank you. It was such beautiful work. I mean, unbelievable, her achievements at a time which was, even now today, a dominated industry by men.
Yeah.
You know, to not just the design, but the actual publishing. And we can talk about this later, because women do have a wonderful history of being publishers from the, you know, beginning of book publishing. We'll talk about it later. Thank you very much, Marina. That was
Gracias.
very wonderful. Our next presenter is Jimena Gamillo. And I'll let you tell everyone what you're going to be presenting. So I'll be quiet and I will leave. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jimena Gamillo, and I'm a graphic designer. And I'm going to be talking about the beginning of my research project, thanks to the HMCT. So my topic is Quechua. So what is Quechua? Quechua is an indigenous language family spoken by the Quechua people. So it actually translates to Runasimi in the actual language, and that means the people's speech, which is kind of cool. And it was the language spoken in the Inca Empire, also known as Tahuantinsuyo. And in modern day map, it kind of goes through Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. So it's very large. It's not just Peru. And at the time of the Inca Empire, the language was never written. It was only spoken. And actually, the only item that's been recorded as like a language thing is called a quipus, which is actually a system of knotted fibers. And these things were used to collect data and keeping records. So basically, I guess what they did with them was like census, like calendar information, and like military organization. But they were basically brought from city to city by these messengers called the Chasquis. And these men were very like fit and like very agile because they had to like basically run 14 miles a day. And it was a relay system. So they would like meet and then like pass and the quipus and then kind of continue. But they were also very smart because they were able to translate these messages from city to city. And to this day, they haven't really been decoded, even though they've been studied a lot, which I kind of find interesting. But back to Quechua, obviously Francisco Pizarro captured the last Inca ruler. His name was Atahualpa. We see him right here. And, you know, it was the end of the Inca Empire. And at the beginning, the Spanish didn't really enforce Spanish onto them. And the Incas didn't really care to teach Quechua to the Spanish. So they were kind of like weirdly cohabitating and just kind of using like body language to communicate with each other. But they were kind of like living within the two languages. So this is actually the first time in 1560. This is the first written record of Quechua, and it was by the Catholic Church. So they made this publication to try to get other Catholic people to learn Quechua in order to convert them to their religion. And so this language that was written was Spanish-based in orthography, which means that they basically wrote it in Spanish to sound like Quechua, but essentially it's just Spanish. So this kind of kept happening throughout times. And then there was Tupac Amaru II, and he's really important because he is like he was a mestizo leader, which means he was half, and he was really rebelling to the Spanish. And this caused a lot of battles, a lot of uproar, and the Spanish really didn't like him. So obviously they killed him. But before this happened, they decided to ban Quechua because they realized people were using Quechua to kind of meet up and like kind of plan like behind the Spanish. So this was the first time like they put this negative connotation on the language. And even texts that were pro-colonialism or like pro-Catholic, they still banned everything. They were like, no, like stop speaking this language. And yes, Tupac is also named after Tupac Amaru. That was me. So like I said before, Quechua is not a single dialect. So it's not one language, it's multiple languages. And depending on the region, it kind of changes. So there's basically two huge divisions between both of them. The first one is Quechua 1, and the second one's called Quechua 2. And their nicknames are Waiwash and Wampu. And then out of the second one, Wampu, there's 3 subdivisions. And the one that we used for the dictionary is the third one right here. And the reason behind this is because it's the dialect spoken in Cusco, which is the capital of the Inca Empire. So how you write it, it's like an SOV language. So subject, object, verb. So Maria is Maria Wasi's house, Ru was built, but then there's things you add to it to make it the correct sense. And you can kind of add to it. So like Michi means cat. And if you want to say the cats, you would say Michikuna. And if you want to say with the cats, you would say Michikuna 1. So it kind of like piles in, you know? So currently only 19% of Peruvians speak the language. So it's been declining. And there's a lot of reasons for this. First, like the lack of media, like there's not a lot of books that are translated in Quechua. Also, like newspapers, like TV shows, songs, like there's a few, but there's not a lot, you know? And then the increase of urbanization and obviously the use of Spanish in schools. So what kind of happening here, it's that Quechua speaking parents are avoiding teaching their children Quechua because they think and they believe that if they only teach them Spanish, their kids will be more successful and will have more money when they grow up, which is kind of a shame because like they're kind of being forced to abandon and like suppress their natural language in favor of speaking the dominant tongue. So this has kind of been happening ever since then. And in 1959, Sebastián Salazar Bondi, who's a really famous Peruvian writer from the 60s, he wrote this essay and he published it in the most popular Peruvian newspaper called El Comercio. And he said these things. He said, any cultured Peruvian must have a copy of this dictionary on the bookshelf. And then he said, this is part of the obligation to integrate nationality as a single and indissoluble unit. So here, basically, he's like begging people to like not have a shame in knowing this language. Like it's really important for our culture and that we should be celebrating this language. And like as a Peruvian, and like there's different kinds of people, but like by having this dictionary in your possession, you're kind of like jumping a bridge into one people, which is really beautiful. And this actually caused like an uproar socially, at least in the city towns. And so in 1975, Peru officially calls Quechua a national language. And Peru is the first country in South America to do this, which is cool. So then kind of bringing it back to me, as I was researching this, I was like thinking, why am I doing this topic? And obviously I grew up in Peru, but I lived in Los Angeles for a long time as well. And then just bringing it to my own neighborhood, for example, like the LA Art Book Fair. I've been to the LA Art Book Fair 6 times. I think every time that it was in LA, actually. And I buy a lot of books and a lot of publications about a lot of topics, but there's not a lot of representation in the topic or actually just Peruvian like literature or like books. And in 2019, it was actually the first time that Print and Matter offered a table to a Peruvian press, which was really exciting. But I don't think it's enough. And I think it's important to bring light to these topics and issues. So for my project, once I was like kind of researching everything, I really became really interested in these root words, which are basically Peruvian slang that it's currently used in the dialect, but the root words are actually from Quechua. So the word wawa, it means baby in Spanish, but it's actually a Quechua word that means baby. And then the word pucho, which means cigarette in Spanish, I think in Quechua it means like a ring of fire, a lighting of fire. And they used to do that in rituals. So I think it's funny that like these words are kind of coming back, and I want to do something with these words. And then I started thinking about color too, because I think it's really important to the culture. So this is an unki, which is a tunic that the Incas used to wear. And it has a lot of really cool shapes throughout the clothes. And as you can tell, like there's a lot of colors and they're really beautiful. And they kind of also signify as a uniform because people could tell like things about your life based upon this like icons and like illustrations. And they kind of varied based on location. So for example, like in one city, they really did stars. So like it would mean something else in another city. But I thought it was cool that they could like read something off your clothes. So like, for example, like if you were a graphic designer, like they would have a pattern for you to wear. So if you were walking, somebody could know you were a graphic designer just based on what you were wearing, which I think it's rad. And then I also started really looking into Peruvian traditional clothing making. And here again, like another code embedded in this like illustrations and like color usage. And I was actually in Cusco, like I think 3 years ago, and a lady who was weaving was telling us the story as she was weaving it. So she was like, well, blue for me means river, or, and then she was like kind of writing her own story through color, which I found really interesting. So I kind of want to use this for my project a lot. And then I started thinking about type and like how I can illustrate this like root words. And so as I was researching, I started creating shapes kind of like as a reaction. I started developing a new typeface, I guess. And it was inspired by vernacular in the city, like in Lima specifically, and also type that I kind of grew up seeing, that it's kind of like the opposite of Swiss type. It's like very chunky and like very playful, that I kind of saw, like this is a famous ice cream place in Peru. And I would just see this every summer or throughout the whole city. But I also wanted to give myself a restriction. So I kind of made this two shapes, this kind of reference doors and windows. And I started developing a typeface. And I, this is Mama, this is Wawa. But I kind of hope to kind of incorporate color in it. I need to do some color testing for it. I don't know if I want to make them 3D, if I want to like bring paint in it or textiles, but or even if I'm going to be using this typeface right now. But right now it's like a reaction that I just made it through research. So these are just some words that I set. The Talking Heads song. But my end goal for the project is to make a publication that celebrates Quechua and this root word specifically. And the goal is for it to be co-published with a Peruvian press and an American press. And so a rough index, I think I would write an essay about it, like all my research and all my findings. And I also would want to talk about language erasure. And I actually found somebody who had already been researching stuff about Spanish language erasure because of the Philippines. And then the plate section, which would be the illustrations of the words. And then it's good to give yourself deadlines. So I gave myself the deadline of the end of the year at 11:59:59, and that's.
Thank you, Jimena. I have to say, I love the HMCT in your Quechua language. It's very nice. I think you should continue to develop the alphabet. I think it's fabulous. Absolutely.
Oh, thank
you so much. It's very very interesting, and we'll have some interesting questions for you at the end of the presentations. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what Jimena is going to do. Next is Laura Mesea. Did I get your name right?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. I'm just going to turn it over to you so you can explain what your research was and so far how much you've developed it. Okay.
Thank you, Gloria. Hello, good night, buena nit, buenas noches a todo el mundo. Gracias por estar aquí. I'm going to talk about the project I have developed in this residence. My project is a project that is type design, and I'm going to talk about a bit of the process and the final results, the results I got so far. So the introduction to my Typographers-in-Residence projects, I will talk a little bit about my motivation. So my first motivations is calligraphy and writing. I'm really interested in calligraphy and writing. So I'm not a calligrapher, but I practice calligraphy as a basis for my lettering and type design work. And from this, about the calligraphy, I discovered the relevance of calligraphy when I was a type design student at Type Media in The Hague. And thanks to that, I learned that the Latin alphabet letters are built as a system composed by part of strokes. So this for me was a complete discovery. I didn't do calligraphy before enrolling in the Type Media course. And I got really fascinated by this idea that with very few parts of letters, you can create a full system of letters. And the second motivation is the research work of Erik Kindle and Fritz Majors on the history of stenciled letter forms. When I was a student in The Hague, in KBK, we had the pleasure of being the students constructing and designing the exhibition of Fritz Majors, who got the Harry Northside Prize some years before. And then I discovered his research on the stencils. And for me, now I can say, after so many years after so many years I met him for the first time, I can say now that he has been a huge influence on my work and my way to see letters, because I learned from his way of working that type design is a system. No? So at this exhibition we had in The Hague, we could learn from him all these principles of constructing letters. For me, it's very important reference point. And then also about the stencils, I became completely in love with the stencil shapes when I discovered the archive that Erik Kindle keeps in Reading, in the University of Reading. And he keeps this archive about the printing tools for printing stencils. And he was very kind to show me all his collection, and it was mind-blowing. And for me, it was really amazing. Another source of inspiration for me is the found letters. The letters I found in either in book covers or also in lettering. And I keep collecting examples of all these letters. I also collect books by the covers, and I keep this archive of photos, and I have this selection. I'm trying to keep a nice archive, a selection of typefaces by shapes, and I have an archive of photos of stencil letters that I also keep as a collection in my Instagram account. And then finally, my stencil workshops. I have been teaching type design for some years, and I started teaching type design in workshops, like a small group of people and specific hours. And I discovered that showing a stencil as a system of teaching type design was really important for students and good. And since then I have been doing these workshops, and for me it's still a very nice way to introduce type design to beginners. And then from all of this, I defined the project of the residence that consists of this deepening the design of stencil typefaces from the calligraphic models as a fusion between both disciplines. And then I formulate the project. And these are the principles that my project revolves around. The relation with the calligraphic models, the stencil system, as a resolution with a minimal number of parts, a resolution of an alphabet with a minimal number of parts, the selected differences between different styles of calligraphy, and the different sets of capital as an exploration field for me. As calligraphic models, I took those of Oriol Miró, who has been my teacher of calligraphy for many, many years. And I explored the idea of how different broad knit pens and same proportions in letters in calligraphy can give different thickness to the stroke. Sorry. So if I use different tools in calligraphy, I can give different thickness to the strokes of the shapes. So coming back to this image you saw before, my starting point was from the models of Oriol Miró. I started to transfer his calligraphic shapes into my stencil parts. And this was my system. And then I tried to keep the numbers of parts as minimum as possible, because I want to show in a way that it's possible to create a system and an alphabet with a reduced number of parts, but still keeping the flavor of calligraphy. So these are the elements for the lowercase. And I started building the lowercase, and my first explorations were based on looking for the balance between harmony and legibility in text. So I started working with different proportions. You can see here different explorations. And then I defined the proportions. So when you have a calligraphy, normal calligraphy or standard calligraphy, the proportions are a bit different, because for instance, the ascenders are much higher than normally typefaces do. Normally type designers adapt these calligraphic models into some proportions that are shorter in ascenders and slightly shorter in descenders, to make it more legible and not wasting so much space. So I set my proportions based on this principle, and then I started to create letters with the modules, with the parts, and I defined 2 weights from the beginning. So these proportions are my base. I first was starting 2 kinds of proportions. Here you see grade 1 and grade 2. And as you see, grade 2 is more loyal to the calligraphic proportions, and grade 1 is more loyal in a way to typographic proportions. So I stick to the first one, and here you can see how it looks in a text. How is the texture? For me, it's also very, very important to have in mind the texture of the typeface, because when you have this balance between the emptiness and the full shapes, no? the form and the counterform, then is when you get the system right. So for me, it was very important to have characters very fast to be able to evaluate and validate the texture and the color of the typeface. So I also designed some numbers, and this is how they look so far, because I think always numbers are giving you clues of how to design other letters. Normally we leave, I used to leave numerals at the end. And now I'm starting designing typefaces also with some letters, but also numerals, because I think that numerals can give a lot of characters to typeface. And then I also look at the different calligraphy history periods. This requires a bit more development. Hopefully in the publication I will manage to explain this in a better way. This is a short presentation. But for me, I thought, okay, I have this lowercase, and what about the capitals? Am I going to stick to one style of capitals, or should I explore different ways of building capitals? And then this was my point, like which capitals could match with the humanistic lowercase that I already had. And this is the list. All these calligraphic styles can match with the minuscule, with the humanistic minuscule. So I decided to start with the most common, the Roman capitals, which origin is in those letters used in the Roman Empire, and also with the humanistic capitals of San Vito. This is from the 15th century, that consists in an evolution of the Romans. Having a very interesting, along this period of research, I have very interesting chats with Oriol Miró about this concept. No? So calligraphy is something that is not stuck in periods. So calligraphy styles go and come back, and they are mixed. So it's a constant evolution. And so the manuscripts that we can find later, they are also looking to the manuscripts behind. So there's a huge influence between different periods of calligraphic periods. So this is also interesting for me to put some sense on the project, because what I'm saying also in my project is that if calligraphy is related, type is also related, and they can also have all these kind of capitals. No? So I took, as I did with humanistic, I also took the Oriol Miró's models for the Romans, for the humanistic Romans. And then besides together with the humanistic, so both the Romans and the ones in the 15th century. I also had a look to the rustic shapes, and I thought that it could be interesting to introduce this also in my project because it comes from the same tools, but it has completely different shapes. So here you can see that the rustic capitals have completely different proportions. Actually, it's much, much higher and much, much narrower. But what I did was to invent my own rustic style to match with the proportions I already had. So for my project, I defined these 3 sets of capitals, that it was going to be first the capital Roman. So I first started with the Roman capitals, and here you can see some words with the capitals integrated in normal or regular weight. So far, my typeface has 2 weights. That one is called normal or regular, and the other one is called negrita or bold. Yeah, and then here you can see some words in capitals in both ways as well. And then once I had the Roman set, I draw and adapted the uncial and rustic to the Roman proportions. Here you see how the same lowercase match perfectly with the different capital styles. So this is my point in this project, trying to find this harmony also in different styles. And here you see all in capitals, and here you see how it looks, the rustic capital in negrita or bold. I don't have the regular yet, and also I don't have the uncial set. In the uncial set, I only have the word uncial to be able to show it to you today. So this was my first idea of family: a Roman, an uncial, and rustic capitals with humanistic lowercase. And here you see how it works, the different words with the different set of capitals. And then once I had this, and I could check and really validate that I could use this humanistic lowercase with the different sets of capitals, I thought, but this is really like, okay, this is something that you expect, no, in the project. And then I thought, what if I try a sort of rustic lowercase? And then I start drawing again, and I invented a rustic lowercase in a way, because there's not such a calligraphy set. And mostly the difference is in the terminal constructions, and I try to keep the proportions in the same way, and also for the negrita weight, for the bold weight. And then at this point is when I thought, how can I make it more special or more expressive or more unique? Because I reached the point that I say, okay, I like it. I think I am in somewhere, but probably it's not enough. No? For me, then this, what you see now on the screen, is sort of a transition typeface. So it's a meaning like a rustic close to a humanistic. And then I decided to create something that I call it super rustic. That consists in the mix of the rustic Roman construction with some italic shapes, using really big serifs. That this is the point, no? How to exaggerate and how to put more emphasis on the shapes, no? And making more brutal in a way, no? I'm very interested also in brutalism, and now I'm trying to put this energy and force. And then, as you can see, I introduced some italic shapes as well. So I decided to change completely the construction of the A and the G. And then I thought, okay, is this the shape I really like for the G and the A? And then I introduced a new shape. So all this is important to say at this point, that is again and still done and built with a minimum number of shapes. So this is very important as well. So here you see it as letters, but the principle of construction can be very much deconstructed in very few pieces. This rustic the super rustic came from the drawings I did as experimentation. So this is just an example of the process. I have a lot of drawings. I have like 9 or 10 versions of every capital of the rustic, because I thought that it was important to make an evolution from the humanistic to the rustic, and trying to make versions based on different parts of the letter. So this is the letter B. You see it here. It's a lot of work on the vertical stroke, and then in some letters, in other capitals, the experimentations in somewhere else, maybe in the leg, maybe in the way that the bowl is built, how the connection of thin and thick strokes is done, etc., etc. And then I also recognize, not only me, also some friends told me that there were also some conscious and not some conscious reference. So then in a moment I realized that all these things that I like and I look are in my brain, and I translate it into letters in a sort of unconscious way. So then I realized that I was really, really, really into the shapes of Helmut Zalden, this calligrapher, Dutch calligrapher, book cover designer that I admire profoundly. You see that it's a stroke, this is full expression. Then Matisse works, and also these Spanish sculptors, Jorge Oteiza y Chillida, this idea of playing with the emptiness and the full, form and counterform. And this is the result of this super rustic that, and I also start to explore with letters that are much complicated. Like here, you see the example of the geminated L, that is a character that is only used in Catalan. And I think that this typeface, when you see it in your own language, make it more close to you. So these are really nice words in Catalan. Puccinelli is polichinela in Spanish, like a puppet in English. And yeah, so trying to find words that really serve me to express the capabilities of this typeface. So far, at this point, this is my project. I have 4 styles and 2 weights. So Roman, uncial, rustic, and super rustic. And 4 regular and 4 bold. But in styles, let's say that these 3 styles share the same lowercase, the Roman, the uncial, and the rustic, and the super rustic has 2 versions so far of lowercase. So this is something that I need to still develop, because of course it's some time. But yeah, and then the name so far, I mean, I have been really hard trying to find a name for this typeface, but it's so complicated. It's so complicated to put a name to your typeface. But I put this name, ella in Spanish or in Catalan, and that is she in English, no? Because for me, typefaces are feminine. And I always, the other day with Marina and Ximena and Sandra and Daphne and Gloria, of course, we were talking about the name of the typeface. And we were exploring a little bit which are my inspirations when I have to put a name to a typeface, no? And we were talking about this idea of stencil, and this name of Fragmenta came to our minds, but Fragmenta is already taken. And then I thought about the name of Gloria, because I think this typeface can express very well, like, but Gloria is also taken. So I put this sort of beta name, ella, and I think that in a day like today, 8th of March, Women's Day, this typeface, this presentation, I think this name, ella, is pretty nice for me so far. That's all. That's everything I wanted to tell you for now. Thank you so much. Gracias. Gracias.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful name for the typeface, and I also like the double L. Again.
Yes.
You can the double L. So I want to thank you, Laura. It was just fabulous. And stay up. You have to come back. So our next and our final presenters, I'm so I can't believe we're at our final presentation. Our final to present is Sandra Garcia and Daphne Martinez, who will talk about reading and learning in type design. And I'm just going to turn it over to you ladies.
Okay, thank you. Hola a todos, bienvenidos. Hello everyone. Welcome to this little talk. We are Sandra and Daphne from Tipas Tech. And we want to begin saying thank you to the Hofmans Milken Center for Typography for allowing us to focus specifically on this project for a whole month. It was very constructive. Now we are going to talk about our project Actly, a typeface for new and better readers, based on the research about the use of typefaces for the teaching to read in Mexico.
So this project began in 2019 when we made a field study about the typefaces used in educational book for learning to read, created by the Ministry of Education in Mexico. These books are supposed to be suitable for children between 5 and 7 years old. From this research, we realized some premises and details that will help facilitate first reader learning to read. From there, we have designed a typeface with the purpose to enhance the reading learning experience during our residence at Hofmans Milken Center for Typography in February 2021.
Yeah, in order to develop this font, we found ourselves in the need of finding out what kind of morphological characteristics this font should have to facilitate the reader's learning process. To do this, we require a series of practical tests that expose both the existing theories and our own, hoping to find some enlightening results. We hypothesize that the recognition of characters is a determining factor in the design of fonts for first readers.
So I'm going to talk about the typeface project. The formal decisions in this first approach were made thanks to the conclusions and results of our research, based on the idea that those more complex shapes with accessories and visible details are really positive feature for first readers learning to read process. We know that a typographic font is a system in which the similarity and standardization of its elements is the key to success in recognizing the basic shapes of the alphabet. But we propose to include certain differentiating features in a controlled way that can help the reader to better recognize the characters at first sight. That is our main challenge in the design of this prototype font.
Okay, we first defined the general characteristics that could help us to have a global idea about what we're looking for during the sketching phase. Then we make a list of particular characteristics in specific letters from the highlights of the investigation and use them as guidelines to design those characters. These general characteristics we decided are first, a semi-serif style, to be able to vary the ending traces and obtain heterogeneous shapes within the system. Then classical proportions, because in this kind of proportion, the widths of the letters are more contrasted, clear, and differentiated between them, mainly in the capital letters. We also look for a big X8 since the greatest amount of information is contained in this area. In addition, the font needs to be perceived in large sizes. We're thinking about at least 14 points. So the first reader can better distinguish the features that they are just beginning to know. But we also choose long ascenders because the differentiating features between letters that belong to the same form group are usually found in this area. We are going to need more space there to have a clear, easy to identify accessories. We also proposed open counters to make the letters clearer and avoid confusion between related signs. Here we can see a comparison between Futura, the actual use font, and Actly, our own font. And finally, we choose a moderate contrast to let the reader perceive full shapes with no breaks, and medium to dark color that will allow the fonts to be more forceful and clear to read at first sight.
We also include some very particular characteristics, double story A and G to avoid confusion with O. Clear differentiation in letters like uppercase I, lowercase l, I and J. We propose to make J with hook, A straight with a big diacritic and probably not round, lowercase l with a short tail. As you can see, in comparison with Futura, there are a lot of accessories going to different directions and help to recognize each letter. Different input strokes in D, B, P, and Q. Worn and modern shapes with fracture and rounded ends that allow creating a strong but close personality with a slightly flaring stems focused on recognition and really to emphasize the weight on the finishings. Finally, a squarish uppercase U and lowercase u with tail.
Now we formally can present you aptly. We call it like that because that is a Nahuatl word for seed, as a metaphor that if reading is learned well from the initial phase, it is like a good seed that will grow and flourish as a source of greater learning and human development. We decided to choose a native Mexican language word, first of all, to remind us that Mexico is a pluricultural country with many languages spoken, not only Spanish, and also because that helps us to make sure that the name hasn't taken yet. It is really hard to find a really original name. We chose Nahuatl because it is the second most spoken language in the area of Mexico City, where we had developed this project. Actually, it is pronounced Achtli, but we know it's kind of difficult for someone and everybody's going to call it Achtli, so we don't have a problem with that. One of our goals is for this typeface to work for all the beginning readers in Mexico, that no matter what language they speak, they must be able to read with Achtli.
I'm going to talk about Achtli book. As a continuation of the project and detached from one of the conclusions of the research about the need to connect the typography with other knowledge fields involved with the learning to read process, like pedagogy and publishers, we have extended the project to develop first a complete typeface family with an extended character set, ideal to design print and digital publication for first readers. Initially include the 5 weights and later will incorporate italics to cover all the hierarchy needs, where the gradual change for a first reader to an average reader is the user choice using alternative characteristics with open type. It's called Achtli book. Here in the image, you can see some example of the actual public books. As you may recognize, it is using Futura, and with some examples of Achtli in use. You can see the change of color. A lot of things happen with the texture of ascenders and accessories in the letters. Here, we begin to distinguish 2 reading scenarios for the project. Very first readers, where Achtli takes action as a typeface for didactic materials made by teachers or institutions as well. And editorial design scenarios with readers who are acquiring continuous reading skills, which is what they do in the first 3 grades of primary schools, where hierarchies on the text are needed. The government books belong to the second scenario, and here is where Achtli book fits well.
Okay, now we're going to talk about Achtli Didactic. That's the second extension of our project. And for this, we make a little video presentation. Sandra, please play.
Hi, my name is Achtli Didactic. I'm a font game created for those who are starting to learn how to read and write. Achtli Didactic is very simple to use. Just install the font in your operating system, select it from the font panel in your word processing software, and you can start using it. If the word is correctly written, a picture will pop out when you tap the spacebar. Achtli is programmed in English and Spanish, but very soon it will have support in many languages. The font's programming allows the game to work with initial capital letter, lowercase, and all capitals, contributing to their comprehension, identification, and correct use in the writing system.
Okay, I want to comment here 3 aspects. First of all, this didactic version has a catalog of basic words listed in the user manual. To create this catalog, we carry out an analysis of different books with didactic material that could be found in the Mexican market, as well as at the same public books that we mentioned before, in this search of words that are most used for the teaching of reading and writing. The second thought we have about this is about the technology that primary school teachers and students themselves have. As you could see in the video, this typeface can work with open source software or any software that can read OpenType. We're thinking about OpenOffice, Word, PowerPoint, Adobe InDesign, Illustrator, or Photoshop, among others, and both most popular platforms, Mac and PC. So it is really easy to install, use, and play. And additionally, we believe that the icons that we created for Active Didactic can function outside of the game as supporting vignettes for editorial use, as these illustrations carry out the same typeface DNA in terms of look and weight. It may be a resource for the professors or the designer to create new things.
So finally, some thoughts and reflection about the projects. At the end of this phase, visually speaking, we feel satisfied with the results. However, we still think it is necessary to carry out a study that tests the font and the theories that it entails, and in this way to show whether the expected results are actually obtained in terms of identification of forms and improvement in the learning process reader. We have to finish the whole plan we have started and also try to put it in the real world to use it and test it. That's all for now. Thank you so much. And we are here for any question you have.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going, yes, wait, thank you. It's so nice to see everyone's projects. I, of course, have a few questions that relate to the project. My first question, and I can see that there's been a great influence maybe in your background. What influenced you in your background, in your choice of research topic? You know, and how has that continued? I can see already to influence you in your decision to do your project. I mean, it's very interesting to me because you're all in different, you know, areas of the world right now, but is there a similarity, do you think? Is there a thread that you find between all of you?
I think it's, I don't know, but actually Marina was commenting in the chat, no? She can see the influence of Balduino or the Vimbes Bart, no? This Dutch calligrapher who worked in Mexico, no? I think calligraphy has a huge influence, and I can see, but not because we are calligraphers. I think because we are type designers, we are interested in calligraphy and in shapes, and calligraphy and lettering is something that we are practicing, and I can see that. I can see that we draw letters in a way, you know. We draw letters based on, you know, we draw letters in a way that we are very fond of shapes, and we are very fond of how letters can be expressive in a way. For me, it's something that I can do other things, but where I enjoy the most is when I put this energy into letters. And I think that Sandra and Daphne do the same, because it's something that we cannot, it's something else, a bit more, no? I mean, it's like exploring and exploring and exploring and keep on exploring and trying to put this mood in letters. And I think for me, it's something that is something that motivates me. That's it, no?
Do you know what I noticed in everyone's project? And you can all comment. There is a humanistic quality to every project here, whether if it's about Carolina Amor, or it's about, you know, Peruvian, or what you're doing, Daphne and Cassandra. I've noticed that you've changed. Your typeface is very humanistic. Every single project, but you know, there's this humanistic quality to the work that you're looking at. Don't you agree that what you research, there's a certain amount of humanism in it that is unique? And it's a thread through everyone.
I think it's also
See?
related to crafts, because if you see the presentation of Jimena, no? I mean, the craft is so powerful, no? And I always say that I'm very slow type designer, no? And it's because I spend so many hours drawing, no? And someone told me once that you are an artisan of letters, you know? It's just, it's like a craft, no? Working as a craft, you're drawing letters as a craft, no? Not like trying to finish first, or not trying to keep attached to the first thing that comes, no? And I think it has to do with this idea of building and creating. And I think it's sort of, I don't know, I think the culture of Hispanic culture, no? And I think in Latin America, of course, it's very strong. The colors, the shapes, no? And everything is related. And when you come from Spain and you go to Latin America, it's different, but here in Spain, we have a lot of different cultures and a lot of different regions and a lot of different crafts. And, you know, and also the vernacular lettering in Spain is extremely rich. And this is something that for me is very inspiring. But when you go to Mexico, for instance, you see the calligraphy in the vernacular. And this is something that is translated into letter shapes. No? I think it's a sort of DNA, no? That it belongs to us, because it's what we see since we are kids, no? And it's so much into our brains, you know. For me, this is the reason, I think, you know.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point. Go ahead, Jimena.
I have to agree. I feel like craft has taught me a lot. Like when you kind of meet an expert on a field and like you see how like obsessive and like meticulous they are. Like the other day I was watching a marbling video on YouTube for like an hour about like this like expert marbler. But like when you're such an expert in a field, I feel like there's something that just kind of really inspires you. And I feel like because I had this background in like printmaking and like sign painting and stuff, it kind of helps me think whenever I'm making type, like without me even thinking about it. Yeah.
I also can see that we all are looking for a purpose. It's not like just make, but to get, I don't know, like a way, like something that you can keep going deep and deep and deep and deep. And that's, I think that is a thing that we have all in common.
Yo creo también que, bueno, además creo que un punto de conexión podría parecer una verdad de perogrullo, pero es que en todos hay mucha pasión, ¿no? Como mucha emoción, mucha energía, la carga energética es alta. Ahora, otra cosa que es evidente en todos nuestros proyectos es que todas partimos de un fuerte sentido de la historia. Con una aplicación distinta, pero ese punto no es menor, porque nos hace sujetos históricos muy situados, ¿no? Tenemos que, para estar hoy acá reunidos, tenemos que saber de dónde venimos. ¿No? Hay un tejido con el pasado, desde lo prehispánico, las muestras caligráficas que mostró Laura, las chicas, o sea, yo quiero ver esas tipografías en los libros de textos de nuestros niños, ¿no? Y para mí es pensar cuántas editoras del pasado nos precedieron, ¿no? Entonces creo que también ese es un punto de conexión.
It's very true. It's true. You all have a real interesting sense of history and of understanding how that influences you coming forward, right? Whether it's in color, I mean, you've all expressed it by showing historically what has influenced you in your thoughts and your research and your designs. Something that you're right, we can't, even in Carolina's choices of her editorial designs, very interesting, even though she might have done scientific work, there's something so beautifully humanistic in her editorials, in her publications, that perhaps might get lost otherwise, you know, that they're not sterile. might be scientific, but they're not sterile. They have a certain amount of, you can see the history coming through. And I do agree. I think Sandra and Daphne, I think in your research into children's literature, I was very surprised by your typeface that you're developing. It's not what I had expected at all. It's very interesting.
We try to put a lot of we find a lot of things to develop. When the kids confuse a lot of letters, you try to think, okay, what I can do to fix this? Because when you see this rational typeface like Futura, it's super straight, super, you know, and people think, they think, oh no, it's better for the kids because it's circles and sticks. But maybe we're made something wrong with that. The selection could be bad for the learning process. So we try to throw everything, change everything with the Futura thing, and try to do something super expressive and with a lot of points of identification. Points you can see this letter is totally different, this other shares something, but it's a new thing. So for that reason, maybe for people more conservative could be something to look, something different, but we try to fix something, not just to fit into the typographic field. Yes, it's a typographic project, you know, but we try to fix and try to develop something for others. And that's
so this leads me to the question for everyone. I know that when you started your projects and we asked you to give us a little summary of what you plan to do, did you find any discoveries or surprises in your research that you hadn't been able to discover before? And there is a question in the Q&A, Marina. I don't know if you can access the Q&A.
Dice Bella, ¿no? Que después de mis investigaciones, si, de la vida y la obra de Carolina, si la siento como una amiga, por supuesto, como una cómplice. Uno tiene también una cierta intuición, lo que el peligro es romantizar a los personajes. Y yo empecé a descubrir cosas de ella que yo no me imaginaba. Como que ella, por ejemplo, fue la fundadora de la Galería de Arte Mexicano y se lo dejó luego a su hermana, porque nosotros tenemos como otra imagen, ¿no? El rol tan activo que tuvo en el gremio de editores en México, pero lo que más a mí me fascinó es ver que era una mujer integral, que desde hacer edición, enseñar historia del libro y la tipografía y trabajar activamente en el gremio, me parece que es fascinante, ¿no? Y pues sí es como, no sé si una amiga, pero me gustaría tenerla como abuela, ¿no? O sea, yo sí creo en mis ancestras. Es una ancestra, para mí es una ancestra. Sí, fue, y se me ha ido apareciendo en el tiempo, desde el año 2004.
Yeah, it's true how you become very personal with your project. So did anyone else just, you know, you start on one path and then all of a sudden you find yourself, oh, I need to look at this. Did anyone find themselves, because I know some of you have been very focused on your work for a long time, Laura, and were you able to, or Jimena, were you able to say, oh, I had a chance, I had an epiphany, or something else has happened? Jimena?
I mean, I learned so much. Like I didn't know, I knew history, but like a timeline, you know, like, oh yeah, Spanish took over, you know, I'm half, whatever. But just like going into details and like going into some books and like reading journals and like things like that were very emotional for me, because like it was just like kind of like, whoa. Yeah, I can't, and it's also cool because I feel like I'm gonna go to Peru later on this year to continue my research, and I can't wait to go to like a library and like spend 9 hours and just like, you know, read everything. I think it's really gonna add on.
So most of the research materials that you need to look at is in Peru?
Yeah,
a lot of here.
A lot of them are there. A lot of them are printed here. I found some through the like the downtown Lima National Library, and they were able to digitize some, but most of them you just kind of have to go there. But yeah, I think just learning about my own culture was like fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah. And Laura, I know you always discover.
No, for me, it's like, okay, I think 6 weeks is really short. I think, and also if we were in Pasadena with you, probably the immersion would have been much more, you know, because I have a feeling that has been really fast. And because if I'm looking now at typefaces, it's drawn, I mean, I have been working a lot, very intense, actually. I couldn't do anything else, actually. But still, I know I have to go through every letter and every character to review all of them, you know, because it has been really fast. But at least I got the feeling of what I wanted to get, you know. But I know there's a lot more of exploration. I can, from this super rustic point, I can go much farther, because it's about playing with the shapes, you know, so I can invent whatever I want. I mean, because I'm not pretending, I cannot pretend, I don't pretend to be loyal to, see, I'm loyal to the fact that you need to read it and the color needs to be even, and that you have to have a feeling that it's comfortable to look at it, you know. But when I discovered the rustic, I was like, wait. No, because it was not in
You don't
my
have
plan.
to be that loyal.
Yes, exactly. You don't have to be that loyal, because the rustic, when you see the models, it's also because, you know, it comes from the Roman, but it's done on with brush, on pergamene, on the walls, paint. I found some very nice models of images from Pompeii. And it's really beautiful. And this actually, even the rustic can be, calligraphy can be different. It's different in every model. And what I found is this, a model, let's say a sample or a historic calligraphy style that I haven't explored at all, you know, that is this rustic. But it was funny because the other day when I shared these images in my Instagram, Thomas Marchand sent me a message privately. And he said, this looks like a Gothic rustic italic. No, Gothic rustic, or he said Gothic antigua italic, because he has been doing this project there in Annecy. You know, say, no.
And Thomas was our typographer in residence last year, which brings us an interesting question. We have a question, I have to say, Laura and Jimena and everyone else. It's very unusual to have this kind of typographer in residence when you're all over. So when you're doing your research, it's kind of different. If you were here, right, at the HMCT, you have this kind of central point of research. And you all seem to, like Jimena, you need to get to a library in Peru, and Marina, you're in Mexico, but still, how do you access your research when not everything is digitized? Do you know what I mean? How do you access the libraries to get your information? Like Thomas mentioned to Laura about, it reminds him of this type, or Jimena, you say you have to go to Peru now to do this. So when you're not able to physically visit a research center, how do you say to yourself, how do you organize your research? How do you then start saying, okay, I have a subject, I can't go anywhere. How do you begin your research on something like on these subjects? I can see Jimena and Jimena, how did you begin? And then Marina, how do you begin your research?
I like to look through different sources. So for example, like the LA Public Library, it's one, right? And like the Art Center Library could be one. Or like the UCLA Library. So I kind of start seeing libraries that are local to me. And because of COVID, a lot of them were closed. But so I sent a lot of emails to a lot of people saying like, hey, do you have any books on this topic? And a lot of them would just give you a list of those books. And then I would try to find like PDFs. Sometimes I couldn't find them. I found some. Jimena Maya actually helped me to get some book titles at the Art Center Library. Yeah. But it was hard. And like some I bought, you know, some came on time, some haven't arrived. It's definitely hard to research like during COVID times. Like to even get access to the Peruvian library, I had to send like a picture of my passport and like to prove I was a citizen because like they wouldn't give me access and like all this stuff. So it's been kind of interesting. But I guess you kind of get a little bit creative because you have the limitation, you know? So because of the first talk, I was able to meet some people who had some insight. And so I like set up some Zoom calls with them, and that was helpful as well.
I think I think the hardest thing though, and I was very happy to see Laura in your talk, the influence of sculpture. I thought that's very interesting, the sculpture influence, and everyone, you know, okay, when you look at what you see out there, an influence of sculpture, an influence of Futura, an influence, but I still think it's so important, and I know this is going to be very interesting. I think it's still important to physically see things, you know, to say,
absolutely.
It's a different emotional response when you're doing this kind of research, even in researching of letter forms, because letter forms can be influenced by sculpture, they can be influenced by surface, right? And then you have to, Sandra and Daphne, you have to eventually have children read your
yeah,
it begins with the field study that we made in 2019, but now we need to go back to the classrooms and try again if it's working. Right now we can do not much. Maybe we could make some studies, but yeah, I think it's hard because even in person, it's really hard to control a child and try to tell them, hey, please pay attention, tell me what you're looking here. So I think we're going to wait for that moment.
Yeah, but at the beginning with this research, we have to study a lot about how we can read, how the eyes work, how we understand the letters, why we understand the letters. Some of the books we use, for example, Reading Letters from Sophie Bayer. She's a typography designer and investigator, very important investigator.
She's very good.
So in Mexico, we use an author called Jorge de Buenuna. He wrote a book called Diseño, Comunicación y Neurociencia, something like design, communication, and neuroscience. And we try to understand how the brains work, how your eyes work, and from there we make this test and investigation with children, with kids, and so on for develop this typeface, you know.
So you started, and I know this is for everyone, most of you started your projects before coming to the HMCT for this residency. Most of you were already, you know, already starting your projects, and I think that was fine. We understand that research starts, and sometimes research never gets finished because then you have to do something like work and teach, and so that's the whole idea of the residency, is for you to financially be able to say, oh, I can put time to completing this. So That's just for our attendees. Someone asked how, you start your project. Most of the projects were begun. Yes, Marina.
Sí, yo quería comentar mi situación especial con la investigación. Una de las cosas que me interesaba hacer es el registro lo más exhaustivo posible de los libros en los que Carolina trabajó. Y hay una parte del estudio de la bibliografía material de esos documentos que se va a poder hacer cuando tenga yo finalmente acceso a la biblioteca, para ver algunos peritextos, el colofón, la página legal, algunos elementos que permitan saber en qué faceta realmente trabajó Carolina en esos libros. Pero también quiero señalar un elemento que aquí es muy evidente, digamos, tenemos el apoyo de la residencia, pero que tenemos que entender que cualquiera de los proyectos que hicimos, nosotras todas, no se puede hacer sin una red de colaboración. O sea, no estamos hablando de trabajos aislados, sino trabajos en red. Personalmente, sí, Jimena, gracias al apoyo de la residencia, Jimena me estuvo mandando digitalizaciones de obras que de otra manera no hubiera podido tener. Pero antes de eso, Rodrigo Ortega, que es un encuadernador de México, es un apasionado de la historia, él había digitalizado varios de las revistas de la Escuela de Artes y el Libro, donde yo había ya estado trabajando con esa revista y ahí había piezas de información de Carolina. Rodrigo generosamente puso eso de su colección privada digitalizado, hace muchos años. Luego, cuando aparece el nombre del tipógrafo catalán, la especialista en editores catalanes del exilio, Lisbeth Zavala, me manda información, le pido a ella como experta y me manda información. Y luego entrevistas con personas que trabajaron con Carolina. El doctor Avendaño respondió entrevistas. Lo que quiero decir con esto, más allá de las gracias, es que no se puede hacer investigación, digitalizado o no el material, sin una red de apoyo. Y creo que es un nuevo modelo de investigación distinto a lo que pensamos en el investigador o el historiador en su cubículo, en la torre de cristal. Entonces yo quería mencionar también eso.
Yeah, it's very true that you think, everyone needs assistance. And I'm very happy that Jimena, not this Jimena, the other Jimena, our typography fellow, was able to help you. I think that's important, that's why she'll be working on the catalog.
Yeah.
I have a question. We have one for Daphne and Sandra. I really admire how your research influences your design to be easily legible and for greater differentiation between similar looking letters. This is very important for any research on dyslexia-friendly typefaces. Have you done any research on dyslexia-friendly typefaces? I think you've already hit most of those requirements. So did you do research on dyslexia?
No, not really. We just concentrate on regular first readers, but we know
first readers
that there is something related. Maybe with the PDPQ, I don't know, because I don't really know the issue, but yeah, it would be interesting to maybe continue in that way.
Yeah, dyslexia is a neurological it's a neurological problem, and this is a different field, but yeah, some points match with the dyslexia theme, but we need to learn more and investigate more for develop something for that.
I think your concentration is not necessarily on dyslexia. I think if it addresses it, but that's not really the focus of your project, is really on primary readers, on children who are learning how to read. And if dyslexia is, I think, another issue that perhaps could be addressed with the development of a typeface. But I think you're right. It's much more complicated in terms of, I think it's better. Already you've improved by not teaching people how to read using Futura. I have to tell you, that is one of the most, especially if you get a everyone knows this. If you get a capital I and two L's together, you're looking at
It's the same. It's the same.
It's the same as in the word. I was working with the word illustration. Oh, wait a second. You can't do the capital I and you go, no.
Or Illinois.
It doesn't work.
It's the same problem.
Or Illinois, right? But again, is there something else? If you have a few minutes to wrap up, if you wanted to say anything else.
I would like to say, that what Marina said is extremely important, because for me, I mean, I'm very extremely respectful with calligraphy. I mean, I'm scared to death to make a mistake when I say a century or something, or a style or something, or and I had to thank to Oriol Miró that because it's something interesting that what you say, Gloria, is completely true. I already started before, because I am collecting this different commentation from the different workshops of calligraphy I have done, and then I'm learning more and more. No? But I started already, tried to start a project with Oriol, doing a typeface from his calligraphy, but he did it by himself. He has a typeface designed by himself for his text. So when he has to give text to his students, he designed a typeface for that. And then we started doing this, and I started offering him how was my vision on his calligraphy in my shapes. And it was completely stopped. And then I thought it was a good opportunity, because it's one of these things that you put in a drawer and you always want to do it, and it requires time, because it's a big project. I mean, it's a big project. And then what Marina said, I have been talking with Oriol all these days, like, listen, I need to ask you something. And then he was giving me like mini master classes every time we were talking, and it was extremely nice. I always telling him that he has to write his own book. But this was for me very important. And also something that is very important for me is that when you have to do something like this, you have to set the phases, the preliminary phases. So this is what I explained at the beginning. How I'm going to approach my project, where I'm going to be focused. Trying to be focused on, okay, these are my motivations, but later this is my project. Otherwise, it's so big, I can do so many things.
I think you have to all give yourself deadlines. And I think, Laura, I think hopefully you understand there's deadlines for your projects.
Absolutely, but you know what I couldn't do, and of course I couldn't do it, is to practice the calligraphy by myself. Right. Like, okay, I'm going to do my rustic, it was completely impossible. This is why I asked Oriol to do it from his models. No, the good thing would have been taking these models and do my own calligraphy, but it's completely impossible in this time,
And I think deadlines are very good. Jimena, you gave us a deadline. At the end of, you're going to do a deadline. Sandra,
you have to give yourself a deadline.
I had to set deadline.
You have to set deadlines.
I had to set deadlines.
Do you have a deadline?
Yeah, I think we can finish this on December.
Yeah, this year.
With Jimena.
Okay.
Yeah.
With Jimena. There you go.
Yeah.
The deadline.
It's very
and there you go. That's it for everyone. Laura, you have your deadline. Everyone's doing the end of December.
I think we have the same deadline. We have the same deadline. The 31st of December, and then
this year. And
we come to Pasadena to celebrate.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I have a better idea.
Yeah.
Yo lo voy a
terminar
antes.
Are you?
No, yo lo voy a terminar antes. Espero ir de hecho, estoy sobrepasada del número de cuartillas, ¿no? Pero lo voy a terminar antes, bueno, voy a terminar en el tiempo acordado, pero sí quiero hacer la revisión física de los ejemplares, porque para mí tiene un elemento adicional de importancia, que es resaltar la presencia de estos documentos, de estos libros de Carolina en la Biblioteca Nacional de México. Es decir, para mí también hay como un nivel que es,
Right.
que no es primero, porque ya hice el trabajo de identificación de las ilustraciones de Elvira Gascón, una exiliada española republicana, identificando más de 300 dibujos en los libros de la Biblioteca Nacional. Yo quiero mostrar que también tenemos mucha obra gráfica, ediciones de mujeres en la Biblioteca Nacional, es decir, como un énfasis mucho más específico y que en las fichas catalográficas sea evidente que ahí hay mujeres editoras. Entonces sí quiero
Yes.
ver ese material, pero voy a terminar antes, prometo.
Well, Carolina will be the first chapter
Yeah.
in the book.
Exactly.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it'll be the beginning. That's always good. It'll be the beginning. Well, I wanted to thank everyone again. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful to celebrate with everyone the importance, not just today, but the continuing importance of women, especially in the world of typography and publishing. Again, I stress that women have always had a huge influence in typography and in publishing all over the world. I think it's very important to stress that. Again, thank you all for attending and for all your beautiful work. And if you have any questions, remember, we're always here to help support our residents. You are now part of an illustrious list of people who have participated. And we thank you because you make our program so rich and so enjoyable. So, gracias. And
Gracias a todos.
Gracias
we'll see
a
you
todos.
next.
Thank you
Gracias
so
a todos.
much, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
being
Thank
here.
you so much. Thank you.
Gracias.